was first going to talk about taxi diagrams. Then we're going to talk about terminal procedures, why they might be important. And then the real broad area of this is what can we do if we're flying into really busy airspace. And we'll talk about more at the end, but some of this first stuff kind of applies. So the FAA publishes taxi diagrams for a lot of airports out there, especially if it's a complicated taxiing procedures. So each taxi diagram, you're going to have frequencies up here, typically weather on top, then the tower frequency, ground control, and if there's any clearance delivery. Then you'll have all your taxiways marked, your runways marked. And so why this might be important is if you're flying into an unfamiliar airport, there was, like Tuscaloosa, and you wanted to know, hey, where am I taxiing to? You knew you were landing on 4, so where's Hawthorne FBO? So you might want to figure out where Hawthorne FBO is so that you can anticipate what taxi instructions are. So Tuscaloosa, it's fairly simple to taxi on. I'll show you some more complicated ones to taxi on, and you're pretty familiar with taxiing at Tuscaloosa. So sometimes the taxi diagrams tell you where an FBO is, where they are. Sometimes they don't. So if it does not tell you where the FBO is and you're trying to get to a specific FBO, which is a fixed base operator, maybe that's typically where you're going to land at busier airports. You're going to want to go taxi to them, get gas, maybe have a courtesy car and whatnot. So you can always call the FBO and ask them, hey, where are you located on the field? And they'll let you know. So, we got runway 12, we got runway 30. We know Dixie's over here, but it's not marked, yet Hawthorne is marked over here. Why that is? I don't know. Field elevation's 170, and that's where they took it from the runway. Sometimes that tells you, sometimes it doesn't tell you. Kind of the more important stuff is you want to always keep in mind of anything that's labeled HS1. What it stands for is a hotspot area, and hotspot areas are deemed by the FAA as areas where they can anticipate problems. So there's a hold short line right here for holding short on 30 if you're on the Delta taxiway, and it's right there, and it's kind of in a weird spot. The reason for that is because any traffic landing on 22, they don't want you to be below them. If you're right here holding short, they could possibly, hit you if they come up a little bit short. So that's a hot spot on the Tuscaloosa diagram, and I'll show you how to get a copy of this in a little bit. So this is the Peachtree to Cab Airport. So this is where Charles gets you to plan a cross-country to. So we got those frequencies there, and this is a whole lot more complicated of a runway, of an airport. So we have 3 runways here. We have a 3 left, and we have a 3 right, and then we have a 1-6 and a 3-4. So it's got 3 hot spots. So it's got a hot spot here, it's got a hot spot here, and it's got a hot spot here. So the reason why this hot spot's probably there is because people might be taxiing, they might turn off echo on the Golf, taxiing to 3 right, and they just keep on rolling. More than likely what it probably actually is, they land on 3 right, and then they're taxiing on Golf, and they just might taxi right across. But somebody's landed on 2-1 right. That would make sense since the wind issue. But you cannot cross one-ways unless you're cleared. Here they might be told to taxi to 3 right, so they come down here on Alpha, take a right, then they just cross right over 3 left. Here, it's probably just a situation where they're taxiing down Alpha, and where do they need to go? It might be that they kind of go onto the runway on accident, but they don't realize that they need to take a left on a Bravo. Or, they might be taxiing down Bravo and just taxi right on the runway instead of taxiing down Alpha. So anytime there's a hotspot, you want to keep in mind. And notice on this airport, I think there's 3 or 4 FBOs for Peachtree to Cab, but nowhere does it say where the FBOs are. You can probably expect that they might be somewhere over here and then somewhere over here, but we don't know that for sure. We could call up the FBO and ask them. Here's the Birmingham. It's going to be pretty similar to Peachtree to Cabs. There's no hotspots listed, so that's kind of surprising, but there's less runways. Maybe the taxiways are a little bit less complicated. Kind of the only thing else that I can show you on this one is an ILS Hold place. It looks like railroad tracks. It's not important for you to really know because you only have to comply with it if the tower tells you to hold short of it, or if it's below, I think, 800 feet visibility. 800 feet ceilings and 2 miles visibility. So, you're not going to be flying VFR in any of those conditions since that's not VFR. But so these are just 3 examples of different taxiways. So how we can get a copy of that is it's a terminal procedure is what a taxi diagram is. So we can just Google FAA terminal procedures, hit this first link, and so we can go there. And then I think this website, sends you up to some article about terminal procedures, so you can just go to the terminal procedure search. And that's pretty much what this tab is. So on the terminal procedure search. So what it is there's actual physical copies of these, but now the FAA, allows you to access them online, so you don't have to constantly get a copy of them all the time. So this is the effective date, so it's valid, actually today, until May 22nd. So they're just valid for some period of time. So, let's say we're going to search for Tuscaloosa's airport. So you can just search by state, and you can download all of them, or you can search by specific airports. So we have these takeoff minimums. This is something for IFR. Alternate minimums is something for IFR. This is some hotspot stuff. Let's actually look at that. We'll let that load. AFD hotspot stuff, and then a bunch of instrument approaches, and then we have that airport diagram at the bottom. Yeah. Okay. So it's just some textual descriptions of the hotspot from the TPP. And from and then I imagine this AFD is just from the airfield directory, which might be a little bit different of a publication. So that's how we can find any terminal procedures. What we want to do if we're ever flying into a really busy airspace. So the biggest thing we can do is plan ahead. So that means we want to be familiar with the airport. We want to have a copy of that airport diagram. We want to make sure we're familiar with any procedures or anything like that. So we can look at arrivals, departures. We can get a copy of the taxi diagram. We want to know on the runway where the FBO is. We talked about that earlier. And we want kind of the biggest thing we can do to help ourselves out is anticipate taxi instructions. So you're going to a lot of times know which runway you're going to probably be landing on from some distance out. On the ATIS, they will tell you what runway they're landing on. And so you can have an idea, and so you can know, okay, I land on 3 right, and I can expect, a turnoff somewhere on Golf. I got to be careful about this hotspot, and maybe I'm taxing up to this northeast ramp. So I expect left on Golf, right on Alpha to the northeast ramp. So if you can think about what taxi instructions you might be given, it can always be helpful. And always write down any instructions you're given on taxi instructions, especially if it's an unfamiliar airport, because what you don't want to do is forget. You can also ask for progressive taxi. So what that is they just tell you, hey, keep on going for a little bit, and then they'll just kind of tell you along the way where you need to go. You want to avoid doing that if you can, because they might be busy doing other things. Something you can also do is you can bring someone else who's been there before, or you can just ask somebody, if it's not that complicated. So it's really all about your comfortability. Have you ever flown in busy airports before? Have you not? Writing down instructions. So whenever you're flying into Charlie and Bravo airspace, if you're flying out of it, you're going to have to talk to clearance delivery first, which is a little bit different than what normally happens whenever we are flying out of Delta airspace. We don't have to talk to the clearance delivery. It's only used for IFR operations out of Tuscaloosa. But in Charlie and Bravo airspace, they probably want you to talk to clearance delivery so you can get a squawk code prior to taking off. So what you do is you just call them up, clearance delivery, Cessna, 9160 Hotel. We would like a VFR departure to Tuscaloosa, VFR departure to the north, and you give them your altitude that you want to climb to. And they'll give you a squawk code, and then you can contact ground for that taxi, for those taxi instructions. And so that is what we can do whenever we're operating at busy airports. We got to keep in mind of any different procedures that we're not really used to. We've got to make sure we have a copy of that taxi diagram, write them down, anticipate instructions, and maybe we're having to use a clearance delivery. Sometimes the ATIS will tell you if you have to use the clearance delivery, and you can call up ground and ask them, or you can kind of call up clearance delivery, and that's probably your best bet at Bravo and Charlie airports. Just go ahead and default to clearance delivery, and they'll tell you if that's not the case.